Good afternoon. I'm Tim Mescon, president of Columbus State University, and I really want to welcome all of you to this very, very special and important and compelling event. I want to thank the Department of History and Geography, and I know Dr. Sprayberry will do that more appropriately, but for their incredibly important work that has led to this event and a series of events that really acknowledge and honor some of the most important years in the history of the United States. And I'm grateful to the faculty in the department for their enormous work in bringing this program together. And as a Georgia native, someone who grew up in Atlanta, what a privilege and an honor it is to meet Mr. Person, another Georgia native, another native Atlantan, who helped change the history of this country. And I know you've read much about it, and I won't pry into Mr. Person's story, but there's some elements of this history that are incredibly compelling messages for all of us, students, faculty, and staff today. You know, it was 53 years ago when Mr. Person enrolled at Morehouse College, one of this country's great academic institutions. But how unfortunate it was 53 years ago that he couldn't, as you have, enroll in one of the University System of Georgia institutions. And it's so important to think about that because we talk about how the years go by in the blink of an eye. And I can assure the students gathered here today that while it sounds like ancient history, that to many of us, 1960 is really not that long ago. And likewise, you'll think about that statement when it comes to 2066 and say, what happened to those 53 years? And it's really stunning to think about that. You know, one of the great elements of this story was the commitment that Mr. Person made to make a difference. And the real resistance that he found in committing to become the very first of those Freedom Riders was that he had to gain a permission slip from his parents. But somehow he persevered and managed to do that. And so 52 years ago, when 13 people, 7 blacks, 7 African Americans, 6 whites, boarded 2 buses in Washington, D.C. and headed south, they really rode into the pages of history in this country. And their commitment to nonviolence was given an incredible test. And you'll hear more about that. But through all of that, through all of the perseverance, in all of that adversity and challenge, Mr. Person committed our country. Spent 20 years in the Marines. Thank you for your service. And has continued to carry incredibly important message for decades. He was an entrepreneur who returned to Atlanta to be with family, and where he still volunteers and mentors students on a regular basis. We are so very honored and humbled to have you here today. We thank you for your commitment, your perseverance, your bravery, your fortitude, your service, and for making a difference. And if you would now, please help me welcome the chairman of the Department of History and Geography, Dr. Gary Sprague.
Thanks, Dr. Mescon. Afternoon, everybody. I'm glad everybody came out. I thank you for coming out. This is a real opportunity for me, and an incredible opportunity, because I spent the last 15, 20 years of my life researching the civil rights movement, and to be able to introduce one of my personal heroes, Mr. Charles Person, is quite an honor. My name is Gary Sprayberry. Like Dr. Mescon said, I'm the chair of the History and Geography Department, and throughout the year, our department, in partnership with the Carson McCullers Center for Writers and Musicians, we'll be commemorating the American Civil Rights Movement. Now, we're going to be doing this with a number of events. Lectures by activists and scholars, a film series in the spring, and of course, the traveling Freedom Riders exhibit, which is over in the Schwab Memorial Library right now. So you have to go see it. You have no excuse now. You're on campus, you have to go see it. Now, all of these events have been made possible by the generous support of the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the American Experience series on PBS, and the Faculty Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning here at CSU. With the recent anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington, and the upcoming anniversary of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we thought it was the appropriate time to not only mark these events, but to pay tribute to the many individuals, like our speaker, who participated in the Civil Rights Revolution. This week, we kick off this year-long commemoration with the opening of the Traveling Freedom Riders exhibit, which will be at the library from now until November 7th. The exhibit tells the powerful and harrowing story of hundreds of activists, young and old, who traveled through the Deep South aboard commercial buses in 1961, testing and challenging segregated facilities along interstate routes. They met with fierce resistance at seemingly every stop. One of the buses was burned by Klansmen in Anniston, Alabama on Mother's Day, 1961. Two other buses were attacked in Birmingham and Montgomery, where riders were brutally beaten with sticks, pipes, and heavy chains. Scores of Freedom Riders were arrested when they arrived in Jackson, Mississippi, and then shuffled off to Parchman State Penitentiary, where they were tormented and abused by prison guards and officials. Yet despite these countless indignities, the riders kept coming. Volunteers continued to sign up and walk into the lion's den. When it was over, more than 400 men and women had participated in these protests, inspiring countless others to get involved in the expanding struggle for civil rights. The Freedom Riders' actions and the shocking violence that greeted them every step of the way stunned the nation and brought international condemnation down upon the United States, forcing the Kennedy administration to take steps to safeguard the rights of future interstate travelers. When it was over, the riders had accomplished exactly what they set out to do. They had ended legal segregation in public transportation. Today's speaker, Mr. Charles Person, was one of the original 13 Freedom Riders. He was aboard the Trailways bus that was attacked in Anniston and Birmingham, and he endured savage beatings at the hands of white supremacists. He was, at age 18, the youngest of the riders. But the Freedom Rides was not his first experience in the civil rights movement. In high school, He participated and was active in the NAACP Youth Council. As a freshman at Morehouse College, he had joined an organization called the Atlantic Committee on Appeal for Human Rights and participated in numerous sit-in demonstrations and was arrested and spent some time in jail for his activities. After the Freedom Rides, Mr. Person joined the Marine Corps, as Dr. Mescon mentioned, and served for 20 years until his retirement in 1981. His time in the service included a tour of duty in Vietnam. Following his retirement from the Marines, he lived for a time in Cuba, and where he ran an electronics company near the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. In the mid-1980s, Person returned to his native Atlanta and took a position with the public school system. He had retired just a couple of years ago. Charles Person and Henry Thomas received the Margaret Bush Wilson Lifetime Achievement Award from the St. Louis City NAACP just earlier this year. So I think you would agree with me that he's led a pretty eventful and remarkable life, and I think we're very fortunate and extremely excited to have him here with us today. So please help me welcome to the podium a true American hero, Mr. Charles Person.
Good afternoon. President Mescon, faculty and friends, and to the student leaders of Columbus State University. My wife, Joette, and I are happy to be here. Because I have chosen to use and lead a life of nonviolence, I would be remiss if I didn't comment on the violence in our society. There are those who would ban the use of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. There are those who would oppose use of all weapons. In this atmosphere of confusion and mistrust, I wonder why the King Center for Nonviolent Social Change have not offered its services. I also wonder why the Southern Poverty Law Center, who teach us tolerance, why they haven't offered their services. The question I have for you this morning is this: what are we afraid of? Why are we so afraid? In 1960 and 1961, I know what America was afraid of. It was afraid of you, the college students of America who saw something wrong and were determined to do something about it. A long, long time ago, I made a decision. I just can't take it anymore. I've got to do something. I grew up in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward, an exclusive subdivision called Buttermilk Bottom. My high school civic book described my neighborhood as a blighted area, an urban slum. Mothers stayed at home, and most men worked at jobs that paid them $50 a week or less. Many black women worked as domestic, and they were paid $5 a day plus car fare. No one went hungry, for we had friends or we had family. There was no welfare and no affirmative action. Our mothers taught us to respect women and old people. The old people taught us to be encouraged to seek a better life. They would often say, stay in school, get a good education, or join the army. They'll make a man out of you. The old soldiers taught us patriotism and the unconditional love of God and country. The Atlanta Public Schools during the segregation era was preparing us for failure. Our devoted teachers enabled us to overcome outdated textbooks and obsolete equipment. When the first black students were accepted at the University of Georgia, Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes, white Georgians were astonished. They could not understand how two black students from an all-black school could qualify. The system had done all kinds of things to make sure that they could never reach that level of competency. What white Georgians didn't know, that there were many black kids who could have been successful academically, but many of them would not or could not accept the abuse and remain nonviolent. When the students in the Atlanta University system wrote and published an appeal for human rights, the governor of our great state couldn't believe that black students could have written or produced such a document. He believed it was produced in Russia or some other communist country. Even today, the good things we do, the positive things we do, rarely make the headlines. But let us misbehave or do something wrong, and it's all over the world. In the South, everybody has a nickname. My mother called me Tony. My grandfather called me Bo. In high school, the boys called me the mad scientist or Pierre. The girls called me Powerful Pierre. In the Marine Corps, they called me Charlie, Chuck, Grunt, Leatherneck, Lifer, or Gyrene. During the Civil Rights Movement, the Klan called me Coon, Jigaboo, and Nigger. And the news media didn't know what to call me, so they often referred to me as that 18-year-old Negro from Morehouse College. This afternoon, this 71-year-old Negro from Morehouse College has this to say. I am a veteran of Vietnam and a veteran of the Civil Rights Movement. I saw action in July, Da Nang, Okinawa, Atlanta, Anniston, Birmingham, Montgomery, and New Orleans, Louisiana. I have ribbons and medals for my chest, scars on my body, and knots on my head. But I'm blessed, truly blessed, because I'm still able to tell my story. I was the youngest of the original Freedom Riders. The rest of the group was made up of 2 retired professors, 6 other students, 1 minister, 1 entertainer, and 2 millionaires. There were 3 staff persons from the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, 3 journalists, and 1 photographer. And we departed Washington, D.C. on May 4th, 1961, hoping to be in New Orleans by May 17th for a huge rally. We left in two groups, one on Greyhound and one on Trailway. Most of the ride throughout the upper north was uneventful, few minor confrontations here and there. We finally arrived in Atlanta on May 13th, and we met with Dr. King and his staff. And Dr. King says, well, we've heard this trouble awaits you in Alabama, and really it would probably be best if you discontinued the ride. And we consider his proposal, but we decided to go on with the ride. We left Atlanta on Mother's Day, May 14th, headed for Alabama. I was on the Trailway bus that day. The Trailway bus arrived at the station in Anderson, and the doors were closed. There were several men outside the station, and they were just talking and basically doing nothing. They marched into our driver, and he went out, and he talked to them for a while, and then he got back on the bus, and he says, "I've heard that the Greyhound bus has been set afire and has burned to the ground, and that they're taking the passengers to the hospital by the busloads." Those were our friends, and we had no idea what condition they were in. Unfortunately, there were no cell phones and those kinds of devices to keep us aware of what was going on. So you can imagine how we felt. The bus driver says, "Well, I'm not going to move this bus until the niggers get in the back." Well, we didn't move. And without warning, one of the Klansmen punched me in the face. Then they punched and pushed as we forces me to the back of the bus. They also began to punch and kick the other students, all the time forcing us towards the rear of the bus. At that time, two of the white Freedom Riders, James Pack and Dr. Bergman. Dr. Bergman was 61 years old. They began to beat them severely because the thought of a white person coming to the aid of these black students was just too much for them. I mean, their rage was, it's unimaginable that anyone could generate that kind of hate. But they continually forced, and eventually they started tossing us one over the other towards the back of the bus. It has been said that by one eyewitness that they stacked us in the back of the bus like pancakes. Once the driver was satisfied with the bus being resegregated, then he said that he would head to Birmingham. All along the ride to Birmingham, they taunted us and called us names. We took an alternate route to Birmingham because a well-dressed gentleman had gotten on the bus and told us that there was a mob waiting for the Trailway bus down the road. And had we not taken an alternate route, they probably would have burned 2 buses that day. So it took us 2 hours to get from Anderson to Birmingham. And if you've ever made that trek, you know it does not take 2 hours to go from Anderson to Birmingham. During this beating, James Peck bled so profusely that his blood just covered the floor of the bus. Dr. Bergman, the 61-year-old retired professor, he was knocked to the floor, and they stomped him in his chest, and they virtually would have killed him had his wife not begged him to stop beating him. When we got to Birmingham, James Peck and I were designated testers. We were the ones to go in, check the lunchroom and the restroom to see if they were going to comply. When we got to Birmingham, we entered the main waiting room, and about 20 or more angry men came towards us. They began to punch and kick us. James went down almost immediately. They surrounded me, and I guess they just punched and did whatever. And eventually, one of them hit me in the head with an iron pipe. I received a large cut in the top of my head. James Peck was knocked unconscious and it took 53 stitches to close his wounds. The doctors in Birmingham refused to treat me, so I had a makeshift bandage put on, and over the years I developed a large knot at the base of my skull where it drained. But I had it finally removed in 1998. I didn't cover up, I didn't cry out, and for some unknown reason I felt no pain. I don't understand that. I don't know why. I wasn't overly religious, but and I boxed and played football, so I knew what pain was. But through that whole episode, I don't recall any pain. The Klan allowed me to walk away. I walked from the ramp out to the street, and as luck would have it, or fate, a city bus came along. The driver led me on, and I said, "Take me somewhere." And he took me about a couple blocks, and he said, "Go across the track. There will be someone there who will help you." There, I carried my trusty dime. I called Reverend Shellsworth, and they sent someone to pick me up. We wanted to continue to ride, but we were so badly beaten and battered. The others from the burning Greyhound bus, many of them had received smoke inhalation. But thank God, Diane Nash and a lot of members of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, came to our rescue, and through their efforts, they recruited over 460 Freedom Riders, many who spent anywhere from 30 to 60 days in the Parchman Prison in Mississippi. The Freedom Rides changed my life. It was the most successful campaign of the civil rights movement. Nonviolence works. Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King, and James Farmer would be elated to see nonviolence being used in the world today. The Arab Spring in Egypt, Tunisia, and Yemen, and other parts of the world are using the tactics of nonviolent, passive resistance. Hopefully, IEDs, suicide bombs, and car bombs will become a thing of the past. The wounds from the civil rights movement have healed and are almost forgotten. I now suffer from the effects of Agent Orange, and I have been told that the water supply at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, which was contaminated, that its effects will also impact my health. Being disabled is a humbling condition. Not being able to do the simple things in life, having to depend on others to do for you what you normally would do for yourself, possessing unique talents and knowledge, but unable to share with those who need it. That's my frustration. I didn't know. I couldn't know what it was like to be disabled. But I tell you one thing, I will always be an advocate for the disabled. But there are thousands of teenagers who cannot read, who cannot write, who have no marketable skills. These young people are more disabled than I will ever be. They need our help. Thanks you for the opportunity to share a little bit of what I have seen, a little bit of my life. The events of 2012 and 2013 have provided this generation a number of choices to start their own movement. When the bus for your generation come to town, will you answer the call? Would you? Could you get on the bus? Thank you.
I think Mr. Person is willing to take a few questions from you guys. Is there any way we could maybe turn the lights up a little bit so you can see? Is that possible?
Oh, no.
So are you telling me, my name's Mary Whitworth, I'm history secretary, education major. So you're telling me that while you were on the bus, that the Klansmen got on and stayed on while you continue writing?
In Anniston, they got on and stayed on. One thing, is what happened in Anniston, you have to read, you have to do research because most people overlook what happened in Anniston. They think there was only one bus, that one that was burned. But we were meeting in Anniston, and then we continued into Birmingham. One of the good things about this is that about a month ago, the city of Anniston awarded us the key to the city, which was so surprising because, you know, the first time I had an opportunity to go back, I refused to go. I didn't want to have anything to do with that town. I had nothing but bad memories or bad experiences. But when I went to Anniston with the student FreedomRiders, which in 2011, they convinced me to get off the bus, and I cried uncontrollably. Because the experience was so great, and here, these people were nice. And we were saying, oh, is this the same town? You know? So it was a wonderful experience, and I've tried to work with them since then, because I think they're trying to rebrand themselves. They want young people to come because they tout all the good things that are available for young people, the things that you like to do, and they're going out and changing the infrastructure to make it appeasable or pleasing to young people, because they used to be one of the largest cities in Alabama. They're down to a population of 20,000, and as kids get to be your age, they all leave. So you get almost out of town where you got babies and old folks, which doesn't, you know, let them be old, you know.
My name is Paula Pena. I'm a criminal justice major, and I actually want to work with children later in life. From your aspect, how much do you think it has impacted you as you've gotten older, having those childhood experiences or, you know, adolescent experiences of those violence when you try your best not to be nonviolent and maintain that?
Well, I think when you accept any philosophy, nonviolence being one, and you study that and you watch others, it's difficult at first, but I think that if you don't want to disappoint those who train you, see, that's another thing. See, if you went out on a sit-in or any type of demonstration and you retaliated, it's not so much a reflection on you, but on the whole group. Plus, you sabotage the operation that you're trying to do. You're trying to win people over. This is much like the military tried to do in Vietnam with this pacification program. I think we had something similar to that even in the Iraqi, Afghanistan wars. Is that we know that love works better than guns. Well, guns, you just wipe out your enemy, but you know, but with love, you know, you build a friend. And sometimes it's good to have friends. It's always good to have friends. It's fine. Well, I had some wonderful grandparents, and one thing they had, in spite of, they were like the second generation out of slavery, and they had a love for this country, and they taught us the same way. And I was like some of the people earlier today that every war this country has had, you had someone there. I had an uncle who ran away to fight with Teddy Roosevelt. You know, it's just a part of, you know, our lifestyle. You're expected, that's one of the responsibility of being a citizen. There was a draft there, but most of us volunteered. And it was just a normal extension. However, I think I was a peaceful warrior. Because when I first got to Vietnam, they needed someone who had speak French to help translate. I did a lot of things. I had a very important job, and I think I saved a lot of lives in what I did. Also, one of the other aspects of my job took a few lives, because I was prepared sniper scopes, and if you know about Marine snipers, they were one of the best in Vietnam. But also, I fixed mine detectors and those kind of devices, which prevent IEDs of our day from killing people. I lost nobody while I was there. I had to train other people to do that before I left. So if you love this country, you do what's required. The country, you know, it's just it's no excuse. I mean, if you want to enjoy the benefits of this country, then you're asked to participate. And as a citizen, that's basic.
Thank you for being here. But I have a question. I'm interested to know, did you see the movie The Butler?
Yes, I did.
And if you did, I'm also interested to know, how did you think or feel about the Freedom Riders and how they were depicted in that particular movie?
Well, you know, you have, as a producer of those films, you have a certain license, and, you know, but by and large, it was a good rendition. In fact, the voice track of the Burning Bus was my friend, Hank Thomas. That was his original voice. I think it showed that in life, a lot of times you have a lot of stages in your life. And I think from that standpoint, it showed the turbulent times of that period, and how he interacted with presidents in office and so forth. So they thought that they did a good job, because they invited all the Atlanta Freedom Riders to a private showing, and then they had a nice little reception afterwards, and then they wanted to introduce and see what our reaction was. So we got a chance to tell them exactly how we felt. So.
Good afternoon. My name's Kenneth Cutson, I'm thank you for your service. I have a two-part question. First part of the question is, do you keep in touch with any other original Freedom Riders? And the other part of the question is, who's had the biggest influence on your life?
Yes, we do keep in touch. There's 10 Freedom Riders in the Atlanta area, and periodically, Jim Swerve, I don't know if you know Jim Swerve, but there's an iconic picture of him. He and John Lewis were beaten down in Birmingham. He's a good friend, and even some of the ones that I didn't know personally, who went to prison in parks, when we have a chance to interact with them. It's important that we do, because of the original 13, there's only 3 of us left: John Lewis, Hank Thomas, and myself. And out of the core group. There was one other, we just found out the other day where he is, Jerry Moore. But our numbers are dwindling, and it's ironic that the ones that's left, we are 1 year apart, 71, 72, 73, and I think, and John is a little bit older than that. So it's getting, and our numbers are getting thin, but most of us still active, and we try to be involved in our communities and offer assistance. The person who had probably the most effect on my life was my grandfather. And the reason was he was self-taught. He read every day. He started his day either with the Bible or some other book. He was a carpenter. And he would just kind of take me under his wings, and he would show me how to do things and how to live life. But one thing he said to me, and to this day, I don't understand, he also taught us how to shoot at a very age. Every young boy in the family knew how to shoot. I mean, I'm normally an expert with a rifle and a sharpshooter with a pistol. And I don't know why I chose to be nonviolent. But you know, he would say, never again. The experience he had in the South before he moved to the city, something happened. And he said, never again, but he would never let me know what he meant. But I tell you one thing, he was armed to the teeth. I mean, he had weapons, and he used to polish the stock like you would go out and polish your vintage Corvette or something. I mean, he was really, he kept them well oiled and ready. And he had a trunk, one of those steamers, just with ammo. But, you know, I don't choose to do that. But I respect what he taught me, and I know that, you know, if I had to do that, I could, but I choose not to.
Good afternoon, my name is Gwen Gordon. I'm one of the Army ROTC instructors here. I have a question about your time as a Marine. Did you experience any difficulties as far as segregation and racism there? And if so, what was your philosophy of maintaining your love for the country?
You would right there, wouldn't you? Well, I'm going to tell you something that's going to really surprise you. I can run fast. I can shoot. But I have a distinction that really irritated my DI. He could not accept the fact that the person with the highest GCT or IQ, or however you want it, in his platoon was black. He could not deal with that. He would come through and he would say, he would rub the visor of our three-quart cap and he'd say, shine like a nigga, trying to intimidate me, but he didn't know my background, he would have known that it had no effect on me, okay? But he just couldn't deal with the fact that this, well, I guess technically the smartest guy in his platoon was black. And he demoted me so that I wouldn't get promoted out of boot camp. I mean, he did all kinds of things, but I hung in there, I graduated, and as soon as I got out, I got electronic school, I got meritorious promoted, and the next one meritorious promoted. And I mean, he held me back just a little bit. But I would really like to see Sergeant Schultz today, and just ask him, hey, what was the deal? You had no problem with you running fast. I mean, I could run like a deer, But I guess in those days it was difficult to deal with those kinds of things. That's the one that tickles me the most. The other one was I went to dental, and I guess the way I'm afraid of dentists today, I had a molar extracted with no Novocaine. And as a private, what are you going to do? You sit there and you take it. I mean, I think my fingerprints are still in the handle of that chair.
Hello, so how you doing? My name is Stephen Cooper. I'm a political science junior here at CSU, as well as the president of our Collegiate chapter of NAACP campus. We, as a chapter, like to ask you, seeing all you've gone through, what do you believe is the problem with our youth today, and how can we get ourselves motivated to fight this civil rights?
Well, I think first of all, several things. You don't know your history. You're not going to read and find out about your history. Because I think if you knew your past, all of us, you knew that you come from a good stock. Because Americans, if you think about American history, how we all groups have come here had to work, not only to be accepted, but to learn skills to pass on. What we do now is we don't pass on for our kids the life skills that they need to be successful. Now, if you are a world-class athlete, everybody will come out and help you get ready for the Olympics. You're a singer or whatever rapper, somebody's there to help you. But if you just a little poor student, B, C student, trying to make it in life, you can't get any help. And what I'm saying, we don't have a program where we can help all of our kids. We only handle the superlatives. If you're at the top of your class, oh man, everybody's bending over backwards to help you. But then you're struggling, trying to get a tutor or whatever, there's no help available. We don't read enough. I don't mean these little snippets, I mean read. You spend too much time reading, watching TV, and now it's social media. But at least with social media, I know what you're doing. I mean, really, let's face it, some of the things you guys post, come on.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Jessica McKenzie, and I'm a secondary education history major here at CG. First of all, thank you so much for your powerful words and for sharing your story and for your service to our country. My question comes from an education aspect. You spoke briefly about how we don't read enough and we don't push our students. If there was one thing as a future educator that I could do to prepare my students, what would it be?
Well, I think first thing, a teacher or professor or nurturer is to realize that everybody can learn. Don't come in with your own set of agenda, assuming we don't all learn the same way. And I'll give you an example. I tutor at my church, and generally it's no problem getting kids to read. But this last group, before I got to the point where I can't move around very well, there's nothing I could find to get these young people to read. And I was studying, I pulled what little hair I had out, trying to figure it out. Then I realized that they like hip hop. Now that was a challenge, finding enough clean hip hop material that I could deal with in church. But once I was able to do that, these so-called kids who didn't want to read, didn't like reading, came around, and they turned out to be some of my better students. So you have, it's hard work, but you've got to find out what it is, and I know you don't have a lot of time, that's the problem, is to find out what it takes to motivate the different students in your class, because they all don't come there with the same background. Some is very easily disseminated material, others is like pulling hair, it's difficult. But the main thing is you don't give up, because I admire anyone who goes into the teaching profession, because you're not going to get rich, but it's so fulfilling when you can save one. And I can say that I had a student, he came back to our church, and I think it was just to show off, but we had given up on it, almost given up on it. And he came back, he was so memorable, and everybody went, who was that young man? And he was one of our students, but this kid, if you're a teacher, it's the ones who say, oh, here's another day. But in the end, I think everyone in our program is so happy and so proud because this kid really made a turnaround.
Those names, Kim Gabriel and Linda Meek. If you knowing what you had gone through during the Freedom Ride, you had a chance to do it all over again. You're 18. Would you have done knowing the experience?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that I would, for several reasons. I want to take you back a few years. In 1957, the Russians sent us Sputnik, and I wanted to be a scientist. And the Americans were afraid that the Russians were really going to get ahead of us. So I said, well, okay. I was a good science student, and I was going on a field trip to Oak Ridge National Laboratories in Tennessee. And and I fell in love with my first reactor, and it was love at first sight. And I determined I was going to be a nuclear physicist. So I said, well, hey, I'll go to Georgia Tech. Wrong. Even though I had the qualifications, they wouldn't accept me. I was accepted at MIT, but I couldn't go to Georgia Tech. So that's my motivation. Even though the president wanted us to find people who are skilled in the science and mathematics, and here I was. I had all the qualifications except one. I was black.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ariel Davis. I'm a biology major, but I'm very interested in politics. I wanted to say thank you for making a change in history in this world, in America. But I wanted to ask what advice you would give to someone who wants to make a change, and also would you advise to go to the extent, or even if we do you advise that, do you think that we would have to go to the extent to do that, the things that you've done in this world today?
There problems that exist today are far different from when I was coming along. What you need to do and what the young people need to do is network, talk, socialize. And when you find out that you've got a good idea and you get those who agree with you, you can start a movement, so to speak, and make changes. The change begins with you. Young people, all change in the world starts with young people. Old people are satisfied with things as they are. But you have to become knowledgeable about what your program. And politics is great, but only need honest politicians who are going to do some work. If you're going to go to Washington, be like those guys and gals we got there now, please don't. The last 2 weeks have been rough on this old man. I get so upset because I understand how our government's supposed to work. I understand economics, and that's one thing I wish I could get into because, you know, the politicians play on the fact that most Americans don't know how the country works. They play on the fact that most of you are not economic majors and they play the number game. Just think, 5 years ago, you didn't know what a tree was. You didn't know what a tree was. Nobody talks in trees, we talk in billions. Now, everybody's talking trees. So I had my class, hey, write the trees on the board. I had one student to get it right. Because we don't deal with those kinds of numbers. People don't realize that as long as you want stuff from the government, somebody's got to pay for it. I mean, you just can't have an army, a world army, a navy, and nobody pay. You want welfare, and you want health care, and you want all this stuff. Somebody's got to pay. But we don't understand that. This ain't a politician. You know, you're asking politicians to get you certain stuff, and they put these pork barrels politics, but somehow eventually all this stuff has financial implications and somebody's got to pay. And we have to understand this. When you petition your politician that you want this park, you know, you have these museums for everything, somebody has to pay for it. And as long as we want stuff, our taxes are going to continue to go up and up and up. But I agree with one thing. Nobody should have to pay 35% of their income to have taxes. That's insane. There is no incentive. And we've got to do away with waste. And you see waste, but nobody reports it. My wife gets upset at me when I see the waste and I report it and I get upset because it's stupid. It's my money. But it's important. When I was in the military, as a platoon commander, I'll bet you we turned in at least 400 or 500 beneficial suggestions pointing out waste and fraud in the military. Now, if every command did that, we wouldn't have all these problems. But we see stuff and we don't report it. That takes a little bit of moral courage. That's something we've got all to do. We was coming down here today and some guy's zips. No, it was yesterday. He couldn't wait, and there's 2 lanes of traffic. He goes on the other lane so he can make a left turn. But thank God the police was sitting there waiting for him. Or I got a kick out of that. But you know, if the police are around, we do things that we shouldn't. And I'm thinking, what's unique about being an American is that you don't have to have police to make your behavior be correct. And I try to do that. I try to teach my kids, you know, you don't have to be police to do what's right, to do the right thing.
We have time for one more question.
My name is Mo Valadez. I came here from Los Angeles. And my question was, in your time, that when black people were being oppressed, as in how you had to go against the Klansmen and things like that, and they were being oppressed and forced the black people to join the movement or join similar movements to stop this oppressive force. Do you think in this time that black people could get rid of all those distractions that you were talking about, such as Facebook and all the entertainment that they're into today? Do you think they need that same oppressive force or enemy like that to make the black people wake up today?
Well, I don't think you need to do away with them. I think what needs to happen is to get refocused. What's important in life is not bling bling. It's not the big ride. It's not the big house on the hill. It's how you treat your neighbor. One thing about social media, if you do have an issue, you can share. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff that you can do, Twitter, Facebook, and the like. I just would hope that we would get focused and get back to the real things that are important in life and caring for your family, reaching out to those who are less fortunate than you are. Because some of us have been blessed. And if you've been blessed, then you should share it. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, those small politics who feel that, you know, there are guys in Congress who feel there's a hurricane and they tear up half this campus that you have to fix it up yourselves. But Americans have always worked together and get stuff done. But I think we need to bring it down to the community level. In other words, your neighbor. How do you get along with your neighbor? If you got an old lady whose husband's passed and her grass needs cutting, what's wrong with going there and having her out? It's not a big deal, but it goes a long way. It's just the kids know that we care about each other. And that's what I think we've done. We've gotten so big in our pants that, you know, we can't help it. You know, we'll have someone who we're trying to get ahead, a movie star or a rock star or something. We'll ingratiate ourselves with them, but we won't work with each other. Let's do the little simple tasks. And if we get the little simple things, then all of a sudden, you got big things. You have to start small. But white people have no problem that other groups have. I would be remiss, because they may not tell you, but some of the same things you experience, they've had kids who can't quite go around, just like we have. But it's unique to being American because we are independent. We don't want anybody messing our business. But sometimes you need to mess in our business. Somebody needs to. Because look, I mean, really, you hear the news every night. It starts off with something bad. You never hear anything good. Well, we at CSU, we've got 1,000 kids that will be graduating this, you know, the good stuff. You don't hear that. You know, all of it, you know, it's what, murders, car wrecks, you know, politicians acting badly, but that's all it is. No, I didn't mean that, because I have a lot of friends who are politicians and mean well, and they want to do well, and I spend a lot of time working to get women elected. I never helped the men, but men seem to have the money and so forth. But I got an award from one women's group for just helping them, because a lot of times that people who need help, I was willing to help out. And being in electronics, I have a lot of technology I can help in people's campaign. So I've always done that. But if good people need to serve, and I know it's hard sometimes to trust them, but we need good people. We need good people in all areas. And I know that we have the intellectual ability, there's no doubt in my mind. Americans, they ever want to say that we're not good at science and mathematics anymore. put us in comparison to the world and all this other stuff. But I'll bet on you guys any day of the week.
Mr. Person, I'd like to thank you again for coming today and for inspiring words. You guys are